Drummond Island Dogman, Chapter 6, 7, and 8. Chapter 6. The feeling of dread was so overwhelming that I grabbed Delaney's hand and dragged her to the side by side. What? Delaney asked as she stumbled to keep her balance. She tried to jerk her hand away, but I wouldn't let go. Jackson, will you tell me what's wrong? I'll tell you when we get on our way, I replied. I snapped my head around, peering into the shadows. A branch moved. Get in the machine, I ordered Delaney. All right, she huffed, slipping into the passenger seat and fastening her seatbelt. I punched the start button and the engine roared to life. Hang on, I shouted, slipping my own seatbelt over my shoulder and buckling it into the metal clasp next to my hip. I stepped on the accelerator pedal and hungry tires dug into the earth, throwing mud and gravel and pieces of branches into the air behind us. In seconds, we were racing along the trail as fast as I could safely go. Still, I kept looking behind me, glancing over my shoulder, not knowing what I would see behind us, hoping there would be nothing there, hoping I was wrong. By now, Delaney was getting agitated, not because of anything I'd done or said, but because of what I hadn't said. I hadn't responded to her persistent question about the bear tracks. Instead, I had ignored her and simply ordered her to the side-by-side without saying anything. I know I wasn't being very polite, but at that moment, I did not want to waste any time trying to explain what I was thinking or feeling. In fact, I didn't know myself what I was thinking or feeling. Maybe it was silly, maybe it wasn't, but I had a hunch, a sixth sense, that kept whispering in my ear, telling me to get away as fast as we could. And I don't really know how to explain it. I hadn't spotted anything in those shadows. I hadn't heard anything. Yet my inner danger alarm, a warning bell inside my head, had been set off by something. But what? For whatever reason, I had the feeling that we were being watched. No, worse than that. Not only did I know that we were being watched, but I knew that whatever was watching us was getting ready for something. I had never had such a strong feeling like that ever. So with Delaney riding beside me, I piloted the side-by-side along the trail. The farther we traveled, the better I felt. I'm not sure what we had escaped or what we'd left behind, but I somehow knew that we had narrowly escaped with our lives. Chapter 7. The beast burned with anger. He'd made a mistake and hesitated for too long. He'd missed his chance. He had sprung from his hiding place just as the terrible-sounding machine tore away, spewing damp earth into the air. For a moment he'd thought about giving chase, but he knew that often machines could travel faster than he could. He could chase after his prey, but there was a good chance that he would not be able to keep up. He would lose them. There would be danger in that, he knew. Humans were different from other animals. Humans processed thoughts, had the ability to realize, not unlike his own ability. However, his ability to reason was limited, although enhanced by his animal-like qualities, a super-sensitive nose and ears, keen eyesight, and incredible strength. In most cases, he had a tremendous advantage over his prey. Except for humans. Humans with their ability to think and plan could cause problems for him. They had in the past. It was one of the reasons he'd come to this island in the first place. He'd been hunted by humans for far too long, and he knew it would be only a matter of time before they outsmarted him with their search parties and machines and weapons. No, he'd need a place where he could hide, a forested area he could inhabit without the constant threat of humans, a place where he could be the hunter and not the hunted. So he'd come to Drummond Island. His sharp senses knew the direction to travel, knew where to go in the same way birds knew which direction to fly in the spring and summer. Instinct drew him north out of Wexford County in Michigan's Lower Peninsula and up through the forests of Grayling in the Au Sable River region. He spent some time in Wolverine, nearly a year, before being drawn farther north to Mackinac City, where he'd faced another problem: how to cross the Straits of Mackinac, a berth of water several miles wide where Lake Michigan and Lake Huron met. The Mackinac Bridge? It was open only to traffic, and with its many lights, he would be spotted immediately. He was capable of swimming, but he knew that the long, arduous swim across the straits would require time and effort, leaving him exhausted. No, it would be much better to find an easier way, a route that wouldn't expend so much valuable energy. So, he found a place to hide in the space of an empty semi-trailer. He'd waited in the shadows beyond a parking lot, emerging cautiously to try trailer after trailer until he'd found one with an unlocked door. Once inside, he hid among the various stacks of boxes and crates. This provided him a way to cross the mighty Mackinac Bridge. Hours later, the driver of the large vehicle had stopped at a roadside park along US 2 to rest for a moment. The police never found his body. All they found were deep, angry scratch marks on the door of the semi-truck and a few bits of long, scraggly hair stuck to the vehicle's mirror. Dogman had fled, slipping into the deep, dark woods. Instinct drew him east until he'd reached the sleepy community of Detour Village and the 1-mile span of the St. Mary's River. An easy swim in the cover of night. And on the other side of the river, sanctuary, a new home, a place where he could hide and be safe, a place where he could live on his terms, where he could thrive, a place where he could hunt. Chapter 8. Finally, after we'd traveled a safe distance, far enough from the pond that I was certain we hadn't been followed. By what? I slowed the side-by-side to a stop at the edge of the forest. Ahead of us was a flat, wide stretch of elver. Elver is made up of limestone, often covered by a thin layer of soil where grass and small plants grow. It was formed millions of years ago by wind whipping all the topsoil away, leaving only the bare limestone. In some places, it looked like old cracked cement. On Drummond Island, there's a huge area called the Maxton Plains, which is made up of elver. The area is flat for the most part, and there are trails and two-tracks that thread throughout that region. Lots of tourists come to the Maxton Plains for sightseeing, hiking, or biking, or running the trails with off-road vehicles. What was that all about back there? Delaney asked. Why were you so freaked out? I didn't want to lie to Delaney, but I didn't want her to be frightened either. And I certainly wasn't going to say the word Dogman. Oh, I was pretty sure she'd heard about the legend and the stories, but I had no proof of anything. I didn't even know myself. The only thing I knew was that we'd found some huge tracks near the pond. Tracks that I wasn't familiar with. Tracks that were too big to be made by a bear or a wolf. A moose? No way. Moose tracks are big, but they look totally different from what we saw at the pond. So I told Delaney the truth. I just didn't tell her everything. I don't know, I replied. I just had a weird feeling that we were being watched. I did too, Delaney admitted. Those tracks kind of freaked me out. They were fresh, too, I said. Whatever made them had been in the area right before us. Maybe it was still around watching us, Delaney said. Maybe, I said. And suddenly, I didn't want to talk about it anymore. I was getting freaked out all over again, and I did not like that crawling, uneasy feeling, the feeling I'd had back at the pond. So I changed the subject. Delaney had never been on this part of the island before, and while we sat on the idling side-by-side, I told her what I knew about Maxton Plains and how the region was formed. Back on our property, there's a place Dad and I called Lookout Ledge. It's a ridge on the top of a hill, and from it you can look out and see all over Sturgeon Bay and the St. Mary's River, all sorts of islands, too. I thought Drummond Island was in Lake Huron, Delaney said. It is, sort of, I replied. The waters are the same. The smaller bodies of water have different names, but you're right. All of the waters belong to Lake Huron, and you can see for miles and miles from Lookout Ledge. That sounds awesome, Delaney said. It is, I said, and the trails to get to it are a blast to ride. I can't wait, Delaney said. We continued chatting and soon forgot all about Dogman. But not for long.